And so good afternoon to those who are joining us. I'm just going to keep talking for a little bit longer in order that those can start ramping up. It's quite interesting. We had 49 people register for this, and I did wonder for just a moment who those 49 people could possibly be when we're talking about the States Assembly today. So we'll see how many join us during this web chat. It's the Jersey Chamber of Commerce web chat. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. My name is Murray Norton. I'm the CEO of the Jersey Chamber of Commerce. I'm delighted that we have four of our five panel have joined us at the moment. We're hoping that Dr. Mark Egan will be joining us at some point during the event. I'm just checking all of the screens that I've got all around me to find out if he is joining us or not, but we'll keep an eye on all of that. In the meantime, I'm delighted to introduce you to our panel that we have as we talk about the States Assembly and how it works and where it doesn't work possibly as we spend the next hour doing that. So thank you very much to those who have joined us so far. There is a chat box at the bottom where you can put your comments. There's a Q&A box as well. You can use either of those and we'll get those questions through to our panel. So to our panel, Senator Kristina Moore, first elected as a Deputy of St. Peter and sworn into office back in November of 2011, re-elected as Deputy of St. Peter in 2014 and elected as Senator in 2018. I could list them all, and in fact, why don't I? President of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee, as we know, Chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, also Economic and International Affairs Panel, Chairman's Committee, the Brexit Review Panel, the Future Review of the Hospital Panel, Gender Pay Gap Review Panel, the OneGov Review Panel, and the Government Plan Review Panel. Kristina, welcome. Good to have you with us. Deputy Jess Perchard, elected Deputy of St Saviour No. 3 and sworn into office on the 1st of June back in 2018. Sits on the Privileges and Procedures Committee, the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Jersey Branch Executive Committee, the Economic and International Affairs Panel, the Corporate Services Panel, the Gender Pay Gap Panel as well. Anyone who said that politicians don't have much to do should look at some of the panels they sit on. We're hoping that the Greffier of the States, who started in 2016, will be joining us at some point. And our final panelist is Frank Walker, OBE, first elected to the States back in 1990 as Deputy of St Helier No. 3 District, topped the poll when he was re-elected in 93 and was then elected as Senator with an island-wide mandate in 1996 and re-elected in December 2002, at which time he said it would be his final term of office. During that, I think it was actually, during that political career, numerous committee presidencies, Jersey Post Office, the Finance and Economics Committee, and the Policy and Resources Committee. He was elected as Jersey's first Chief Minister in 2005. That's a heck of a record from that there. I mean, I feel like I'm in the presence of political greatness from the three that we have up in front of us. So thank you for joining us all. Let's first of all just, I don't know if it's just me, are you, and I think the Greffier of the States is just about to join us as well. Mark Egan, thank you very much indeed for joining us. The first question that I have is one that I was thinking about, and that is that when I was in the States and when you were in the States as well, or are in the States now, you're in a bubble in a way of your own, to use a term that we've used quite a lot in the last few months. And I just wonder if you are surprised by how much or how little the public outside of the States and outside of the few political commentators and journalists actually know about what's going on, because it does seem that there is I talk to business leaders a great deal of the time, and they've never seen the States, they've never been in the States Assembly, they've never watched from the gallery, and I get questions asked to me all the time that, how does a proposal work and what happens with an amendment? So I just wonder if you feel there's a lack of knowledge from the public. Senator Kristina Moore first.
Oh, hi, Murray, and hi, everyone. To be honest, I think that recently there's been quite a lot of engagement from the public. They may not understand the technicalities of how it all works, but the essential part is that people feel they can engage with their states members. They can communicate with them over a number of different platforms now. And that should really be a communication. Mark has done great things in terms of filming, having the filming of the assembly so that people can watch it in action, and also the scrutiny hearings as well, because it's all an important functioning part of democracy, and so it's there for those who feel they want to look at it.
So I think I take your point. I think absolutely the fact that it's now on camera is slightly more painful for politicians than it, I don't know who it's more painful for. Deputy Perchard, Jess, you're a newcomer to the States, I suspect, and I suspect there's a great deal of time getting acquainted with all of that to start off with before you even started in the States. Were you someone who was very politically aware from an earlier time than your time in the States?
Truthfully, no. My parents were politically engaged and they always voted, and we talked a bit about politics at home. But I think at the time I perhaps thought I was politically engaged, but having now entered politics, I realised that I didn't know anything before. So I'm not surprised at the lack of engagement that there has been in the past, particularly among my age group. When I reflect on what I knew before I stood, that's a helpful reminder, perhaps of a litmus test of what people know. But I think what was really surprising was on the doorstep during the campaign, I was actually surprised at the age range of people who were disengaged at that time. And so since then, I've been trying to engage more with the wider community about what politics is, who can be a politician, what politicians can and can't be. But I think, obviously, at a time of crisis where everyone's lives are affected by what's going on, we've seen peak political engagement, which actually isn't surprising because everyone's being affected. But there's certainly more engagement now than there was when I first joined 2 years ago.
Frank, this is possibly a good thing, really, isn't it? That we've, if there is a good thing to come out of what we've had in the last 3-4 months, but the political engagement has been so much more. And that's something that hopefully we can continue from here on in, because that can only be a good thing.
Yes.
Frank, what do you make of that?
Well, I obviously go back a bit here. I'm not as current as States members, obviously, but you used the word bubble, Murray, and I think that was certainly a pretty accurate description. I really am pleased that one of the benefits, if that's the right word, of the COVID crisis is much better engagement, because hitherto there really wasn't much at all. And I mirror what Jess said, that on the doorstep, it was really disheartening at times to find how few people knew how the States operated. Having said that, I'm not really that surprised, or I wasn't that surprised, because I just can't listen to the States. Since I left, I can't listen, because sometimes it can be pretty awful sitting in the chamber, but honestly, it sounds that much worse to me sitting at home trying to listen to the radio. And I know I'm by no means alone. You know, so many people I know, they may have strong political opinions, but they hardly ever listen in, and certainly don't watch States debates. You very rarely, it may have changed in the recent past, I hope it has in some respects, you very rarely used to get a significant number of people in the gallery observing the States debate. And I think probably happens in most assemblies. I think ministers, not just ministers, States members do get into a bit of a bubble. And sometimes, and there was a notable case of that, and only one, I'm pleased to say, during the debate this week, sometimes just forget that they're engaging with the public at all. I don't think that applies to most members, but there isn't the level of engagement, or there wasn't certainly, that one would hope for.
I don't know about you, Frank, but I made 4 speeches at the last state sitting, and that was just from my screen here. And no one heard them bar me, but I thought they were brilliant.
Oh, I was ranting.
Yeah, yes, that was a couple of us then. Mark, thank you very much.
What's that, I have to say, yeah.
Yeah, Mark, thank you for joining us. There will be some political opinion here, and I know you won't engage on that side of it, and rightly so, as the Greffier of the States. But talking of the States and the matter of engagement, it must be very difficult to measure what engagement is, because you assume that people are listening and watching.
Well, we have lots of different ways of measuring it, none of which is perfect. We look at our interactions on social media. We look at one of the main things, actually, one of the best measures of engagement is actually the e-petition system, because that was set up specifically to enable people to engage directly with the states and with the politicians. And the last time we looked, I think something like getting on for half the population of the island had at some point signed an e-petition, which was actually a really fantastic measure of the potential for engagement. It's much easier to do that than it is to contact a scrutiny panel or indeed contact a states member. It's not the be all and end all just to click a link and say you support something, but it is important. So we look at all these sorts of different measures, and the aim has been to try and drive it up to increase the rate of connection between people in the island and the state in all its different forms.
I suspect the real proof will be at the point where we have an election and we see how many people actually turn out for an election. That's got to be the result, that every time there's an election, every 4 years, every 5 years, every 3.5 in my case, but in that sort of period, we always think that it's going to be even better the next time round, and for some reason it always seems to disappoint.
Well, yeah, and that is a big issue, and there's a lot of factors in that. I mean, one thing I was interested in was, if you look back to the occupation since then, I don't think the turnout in the senatorial elections has ever been higher than 60%. It sort of peaked in the early 50s. So there's never been a time when turnout in Jersey was as high as it normally is in, say, the UK. So there's something structural going on there, which we're not going to solve, in 4 years or 2 years. It's not suddenly going to transform itself. It is quite a complex and deep-rooted issue. But the turnout was 38% in 2014. It went up to about 42, 43%. That's too low. It's got to be too low for any democracy. It's too low. So we're trying all sorts of different things to engage people more, to encourage people to be involved. And yeah, it is one of the things that might come out of this current crisis, because I think previously, when we tried to talk to people about the importance of voting, not much had happened in Jersey over quite a long time. Basically, tax rates stayed the same. People were generally prosperous. There weren't the big choices that you might see in other places where there are competing parties with different ideological perspectives. So you can see why for some people it'd be like, well, what's the point in voting? Perhaps with this crisis and the different choices that politicians have made, and the fact there's been such a big debate across the island about those, might change the dynamic a little bit.
Interesting to see what the polarised views make on turnout. No, I want to come back to political parties in a moment. It was Graham that asked a question, which I think we're in the midst of answering at the moment, which is, what do the panel think are the key changes that need to happen to ensure we get much greater engagement from all parts of our community, and not just those who are politically motivated? That's a tough question, because it's the one that everyone is trying to think of at the moment. That, what do we do? How do we do that? Kristina, I'm going to come back to you first, which is really unfair of me. But what do you think of the things that we need to do? What are those key changes that need to be brought?
It's a really tricky one, this, and it's really quite an intangible thing. But in my view, I think one of the things that puts a lot of people off is that feeling of despondency. It's like, will anything actually change? And, will anyone ever listen to my view if I go out and vote? And so I think, unfortunately, we do suffer from a level of disengagement simply because people don't think that we meet their needs sometimes, or they just don't feel that things will change to the extent that they would like to see. It's a really tough one, but we have to keep trying and keep trying to do things differently. And there's always opportunity in crisis, and perhaps this is one of those moments that will really encourage people to become more involved. I think certainly people are becoming a bit more politically active and considering standing for election more than I've ever heard, actually.
I've never heard so many people either discussing on the phone, or people you bump into, you see across the street, of course, that will have said, did you listen to the states yesterday of the last couple of days? So I think that in a way that's proof of what you're saying. I'm going to dispense with the senator and deputy, if that's okay with the senator and deputy, Jess, and come to you. Jess, is having more polarized views the way forward? It's leading into my next question, which is political parties, but is this a way of getting more engagement?
I don't know about more polarised views, but I certainly think more diverse representation is necessary. I think that the way to achieve that is for current members to actively plant the idea of running for election in the minds of people who think that they couldn't. The number of times I've said to other young women, for example, just to pick the demographic that I belong to, when I've said, you should run next time, you'd be great. And the common response is, oh, I couldn't do that. And I always say, well, of course you can, why couldn't you? And I think it's because people feel that, well, there are several reasons, but in terms of the kind of emotional, psychological reasons, I think it's a lot to do with self-esteem. I think obviously the public facing side of it terrifies some people. I also think that people just think that a politician looks and sounds a certain way and that they don't fit that demographic or mold. And I think, unfortunately, the only way to change the face of politics is to change the face of politics. So for me, the best way to do that is to support people who want to stand and encourage them to contact a wide range of different members with different political views and find out about how the system works. I know the Gref actually do a great job of doing that in the run-up to election season. Which is really handy, because obviously as members there's always this potential for conflict, so you want to encourage people but not be seen to be in any way conflicted in that process. But yeah, I think the way to improve politics is certainly to diversify more in the assembly.
It's interesting at the moment, Frank, so perhaps this is the tidal wave that we need to, the crest of the wave that we need to ride for a little while. I alluded to political parties there. I wonder what your view is on that.
Okay, I'll come to that in a second if I can. We just pick up a couple of the points already made. I think Kristina was absolutely right that the crisis actually looks as though, and hopefully in that respect it will continue to do so, looks as though it has engaged people like something nothing else has. And I've been saying for years, actually Jersey would benefit from, nobody wants one, obviously, but I've been saying politically, in a perverse way, Jersey would actually benefit from a crisis. And maybe in every other way it's horrendous, but maybe from a political point of view, we will. And then picking up the point about people standing, I'll come on to parties if I can in a second. I'm sure all of us have heard from many people say, oh, no way am I going to put myself through that. You know, you get slagged off, and particularly now with social media, which I didn't have to worry about too much. I'm not going to go through that. But what people don't ever see, and I don't know how to get this over, and I'm not criticizing the media or anyone here, it's downside always that people seem to focus on, and what they can't appreciate and can't see is the incredible upside, certainly I used to get, from being involved in and hopefully winning a really major debate. I used to love it. And the fact that the feeling that I used to get from winning a really important debate, genuinely feeling in the best interests of Jersey, was fantastic. But I'm going back to, and people can't see that, and I really wish they could, but going back to your question, Murray, I used to be totally opposed to party politics, but in the last, 2 years, I guess, I've changed my mind. And I actually think we would benefit now, not least because of the individual attacks that people get at the moment, which I know, as I've already said, deters them on social media. I think we get better candidates standing on better platforms if there was some form of connectivity and some form of club almost around them, people working together with common policies. I actually think the time has come.
There's been talk for a long time of political parties, and of course a long time ago there were political parties. The idea of there being a caucus that people can refer to and go to, that gives them the support network behind that is something that's very often talked about. It certainly was when I was in Commonwealth Parliamentary Association mode, and I think that do you, a difficult one for the Gref to comment on, but do you see that as a complication to our states in terms of how the states would operate with, say, for instance, two political parties? I mean, just in terms of seating, would that have to be rearranged?
I mean, I came from the UK, so I'm perfectly used to a party system. And it's got its pros and cons. Parliamentary institutions will cope with whatever's thrown at them. You know, rules evolve to suit changing situations. Dynamics will be different, but it wouldn't be unworkable. I mean, I think the main thing from my point of view is that party politics, it's not a thing that you can just decree. You can't pass a proposition to say let there be party politics. It has to come up from the grassroots. People have to feel that they want it and that therefore want to vote for it and support it. So not only do the politicians have to club together, but the people who support them have to think that that's a worthwhile proposition. Obviously, Jersey's got quite a long tradition of independence, and there's a lot to be said for independence in politics. There are strengths with that, and some people will you know, be comfortable and happy to see party politics if it comes along. Other people will find that difficult. So there's a sort of communication issue there, and I don't think it's something that can happen overnight, but it may emerge and develop because people want it and see that the advantages of it outweigh the disadvantages of it and are the thing for the moment. But from the Assembly's point of view, you know, we'll be absolutely fine if it comes along and absolutely fine if it doesn't.
Which is the right answer. And Jess, the independence, and I saw you nodding during independence, and I very much steered on the side of being very proud of being an independent candidate, because you can't stick all your colours to one mast at all times. However, having said that, there is a lot to be said from the protection, particularly, and I think as a newcomer coming into the political arena, of having the caucus of other people around you and having that support network of how to do things.
Sure, but I don't think a party is necessarily the answer to that. I think that there is a great support network within the Assembly between certain members, and I also know, you know, from my own experience that I've gone to the Gref at times when I've been in need of support of a variety of kinds. So I don't necessarily think that would be a good rationale for a party. I think I agree with Mark in that parties need to come from the bottom up. They should be they should basically be a reaction of the public. They should be, because there's been a groundswell of a shared view that people have. It's absolutely not something that should come from the top. I mean, my views on it have been quite consistent, and that doesn't mean they won't change, but I think that independence allows you to collaborate more effectively. I think that parties can be in some ways more divisive because you are in a party and you toe the party line and you vote with the party, and my view is that that can actually create division and mistrust and a lack of collaboration, more so than if you're an independent and you're just trying to do the right thing and you collaborate with people to the best of your ability, no matter who they are, to get the best outcome for the island. And that's my personal view, but I think also structurally, I know Mark said they would adapt, and of course I know they would do so with great skill and speed, but the current system for me doesn't work for parties, because we're in a situation now where we have, just for example, and I talk about Reform just because they are the only party we have.
I'm glad you mentioned them, because I think it would be only fair to say that there is a political party.
There is a political party, yeah, and actually they function in a very different way to the typical parties that in other jurisdictions, which I'll mention quickly in a second. But you know, you do have this situation where you have members of Reform in government and members outside of government, and members of Reform scrutinising Reform, and of course it's working in the sense that it can happen, the structure allows it to happen, but I think it's a little bit messy, and But then again, Reform aren't a typical party in the sense that they vote together en bloc on everything. They have a set of, I think it's 10 policies, and they vote together on those 10 things, and the rest of the time they can vote how they like. So they're a different kind of party to the one I think most people think about when we mention party. So there is scope there. I mean, I would prefer to see people come together over their value system and not their policies, because I think policies should just come out of, should be the result of shared values. So you say, well, I want the gender pay gap to close because one of my values is I believe in equality. And then the policy that comes to achieve that value is the thing that you hash out between you from different perspectives, no matter where you stand. So yeah, that's just my view.
That's a view. Thank you very much indeed for that. Kristina, we haven't got your view on political parties yet, but I'll be interested to find out what you think.
Well, the three things, I think, three elements to this. Firstly, because we have an independent system, people's brand is their personality. And that's one of the reasons why I think we have very personality driven politics sometimes, or can be accused of such. And having a party would help the public, in my view, to focus on the policies and the values as well of that party. And it helps massively to assist the public to understand exactly where an individual is coming from, because as an independent you can sometimes sort of swim with different shoals of fish, and that can mean that if you're too much for a waverer, people don't really know where you stand, and they can't trust where you're going to go with their vote, because at the end of the day we're just one person representing all those people who've kindly put us there to give them a voice. And so people need to know that they really understand what your voice is going to be and whether you are really going to represent them when you push that button and say pour or contre. There's also a logistical aspect, I think, to it, in that sharing in a party structure potentially helps members to spread the load. Because I know everybody thinks that we only rock up at once every 2 weeks, but you know, you kindly listed all of the committees that we're on. There's an awful lot of work for everybody in the Assembly, and of course we haven't even mentioned constituent work as well. So it can be really quite full on. And if you just think about the agenda for each sitting comes out, and of course you need to have probably considered what each proposition entails, whether you want to make an amendment or not, whether there's some research to do, and doing all of that off your own bat is pretty relentless. And well, I always think that it's a job, like many, I guess, of managing guilt, because there's an endless amount of stuff to do. You could read morning, noon and night and still never have felt that you've quite done enough. So sharing those responsibilities, in my view, would really help to support members and also to drive a much higher level of debate. But then the third aspect is the Borgen effect, or I call it the Borgen effect. I loved that Danish political drama Borgen. I watched all 3 series, and I think there's another one coming out, which is very exciting. But I noticed, and of course this is only a fiction, but I do think it transfers to the real world. But one thing I noticed about the key character was that she was very driven by policy and very focused on policy at the outset. But as the drama continued and as she became more powerful, there seemed to be a bit of a change, and she actually spent quite a lot of her time managing the party, keeping everybody online. And that is the negative part of it, because people want their politicians to be purely focused on the policy. And of course, we see it time and time again in national and international politics, that the personality of the party becomes the focus of the story. And that's a bit of a shame, really. So
thank you for that. It's a really good point, so I appreciate it. I want to go on to talk about backbenchers and the difference between being in government and being backbenchers, because I think that there are some massive differences, and one of them alluded to what you were talking about there, Kristina, which was the amount of reading you have to do and the amount of support that you need. And there is a massive difference between being in government with officers and having briefings, and perhaps being a backbencher and not having an office and not having an officer. We'll come to that in a moment. It's something that I think is quite important. Before that though, Mark, and a question that did come in actually by email to me, among the many that I've got to get through, that you are the Greffier of the States. And Greffier is not a word that we all get to grapple with from time to time, and we all know what it means. And I noticed actually that, I think I read it, I forget where I read it, but I think you put it up there, which basically was the explanation that you're the chief executive of the States Assembly, in a way, for people to get their head around it. What does a Greffier do?
Oh, I can't let you into the secrets.
Oh, no.
I've discovered that Greffier is a French slang word for a cat. So I don't know where that comes from, but...
nimble.
Well, I spend, I'm obviously in the States quite a lot when the States meets, and I was there all day Wednesday for the fun and games then. And I, principally, we keep records, but we're there to make sure that the thing runs smoothly, that the procedures are followed, and that we get from one end of the order paper to the other in an orderly way. In other words, in accordance with the rules, and sometimes just in accordance with common sense when the rules run out, and we just try and keep to common sense as far as we can. Provide a lot of advice to the bailiff, individual members. I spend a lot of time supporting the Privileges and Procedures Committee, which has a broad range of responsibilities around the running of the Assembly, conduct of members, rules of the Assembly, but also the island's electoral system. We effectively are the instructing officer for the public elections law and stuff like that. So quite heavily involved in planning for the election and information about the election. I also I attend the Council of Ministers, so provide that sort of procedural advice and support to ministers as much as I do to backbenchers. I'm on the State's executive leadership team, which is Charlie Parker's committee of DGs and so on. I get involved in that kind of thing. So it's quite a broad range of responsibilities. But if it's something to do with the Assembly, then it's something to do with me. And one thing that's changed since you were in the Assembly, Murray, is we now have 3, soon to be 4, staff who are dedicated to provide research support for members. So that has hopefully made an impact on backbenchers, but so they don't lack officers in the way they do before. And we've just remodeled the State's members room to make it a functioning office facility. Obviously, this all happened at a point when people couldn't use it, but it's there and ready to use, and that work's going on. Because we did, my strapline for a number of years was Jersey has the worst supported parliamentary institution of any that exists in the Commonwealth bar Guernsey, which is not a great place to be, it seems to me. So we've had the investment in staff and facilities to finally power past the Isle of Man, I hope, and a few others, and to start giving members the type of support that they need in order to function effectively.
Thank you for that, because that negates that question that I was about to ask, because obviously things have changed very slightly. But I think that there was an absolute difference between having, if you like, your own office as a minister or as an assistant minister, and having officers that you can ask for, and to effectively, if you're in government, to assist with the lines of speeches and the propositions that are coming forward, as opposed to a backbencher. But obviously that is changing a great deal. I see you nodding there, Jess. I mean, presumably as a backbencher, do you feel slightly more exposed as a you're standing alone and using your entire workforce is you, isn't it? Plus officers, obviously, now that we're now here.
Yeah, it can be really overwhelming, and I think particularly when you lodge a proposition that is perceived as kind of taking on the government or taking on COM, as we all know I did a few weeks ago. But I think it is changing, and as Mark said, the resources given to backbenchers are immensely welcome and helpful, but you are taking on a whole body of people, and you are one person standing alone, reliant solely on your own ability, reason, good humour, and perseverance. And I think that it's very difficult in that situation. And I think that there is still a way to go before there is more balance between the two different groups. And it's to the benefit of policy to have that balance. I think it's to the benefit of Council of Ministers to have scrutiny members who are supported and well informed, and thoroughly briefed and up to date and knowledgeable. And emotionally supported. It's in everyone's interest, because only in that context will you get the best outcomes for Jersey. So I think that we've had such an amazing change this year by having those research assistants. Yeah, it would be great to have even more in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go, thank you for that. And I am going to slightly switch to ask a question that will go back to Mark, that came from Vivian, who said, it may not be relevant to your meeting, but certainly something to look at in the future. As someone who is listening and was listening to the last sitting, should more training, brackets in the more training be given to those who are elected to represent us? Many are not used to public speaking and could possibly learn how to put points over in a concise and timely manner. Being allowed to ramble on is unprofessional and boring, and other members in the public can see this, and it would not be happening in the private sector. Listening to snipes about Guernsey, of course, is embarrassing. I wish they wouldn't do that. What training do elected members get, or are they just thrown in at the deep end? Now, I could answer this, but I think it's probably best that we go to the Greff for this. And actually, Mark, am I right in thinking you were the presiding officer at the key point that was highlighted in the JEP today, and how difficult a position is that?
That's two questions there, Murray.
Yes,
so
I'm allowed
yes,
2 questions at this point.
Yes, I was. Well, I'd worked in when I came to Jersey. I've never presided over a legislature. It's quite a novel thing to do. But I'd worked in one all my career, so I was sort of familiar with how to do it, and it was a good challenge, and I didn't know whether I'd be able to do it or not, but so far they haven't kicked me out. So it isn't easy, because you have to concentrate on what's being said. So early on I discovered this the hard way, because I decided it was a long debate, and there was a particular deputy speaking, and I decided to try and focus on something else for a moment, and I suddenly heard this deputy say, and that's why I consider that he's a liar. And I thought, oh my God, he's just called somebody a liar, has he? Was he saying? Anyway, I took a punt on it was about the education minister of the day, and I thought he probably has called him a liar, and I interrupted to say that was out of order, and luckily he withdrew it and said, he was obviously just trying it on. And it made me realize that you've got to listen to every word, because if you drift off, all sorts of things can happen. And you have to know the rules, but you also have to kind of have a feel for the sense of things. So, I think you might be referring to Deputy Tadier's contribution on Wednesday, which generally stayed within the rules quite cleverly. And you've got to be, and he also is somebody who knows the rules very well. So he's not somebody that you can take on and quieten unless you're absolutely confident of your ground. And so I was listening quite carefully to wait for the moments where he really was starting to ramble into areas that weren't relevant. And of course, there was a purpose to what he was doing. It wasn't there was an ulterior motive to the whole thing. So it was an interesting challenge to take on. I quite enjoy doing it, actually. In relation to the other question, we are conscious of how difficult it is to members come in with all sorts of different experiences and different levels of understanding of the states and different ideas of what they want to do. So it's really hard to, and they've also got really significant differences in terms of career backgrounds and what they've done and haven't done at different times. So you can't just sort of, it's not like being an employee where you can say, right, we're going to make you do a series of courses and you know, I'm the line manager and I'm going to make it happen. It's, you have to set out an offer and then try and encourage people to take things up. So we provided last time a week's induction that we ran, and then the ministerial side laid on a week's induction, which was more about their view on the issues facing Jersey. And then we didn't provide as much. I think we didn't have money to provide training. We do now, so that's something that we're changing. We did provide a CPA, Commonwealth Parliamentary Association seminar, which lasted 2 or 3 days, where some politicians from around the British Isles came over to Jersey. And it also included quite a well-known parliamentary communications expert who's very good at tips on speaking and how to get your point across in politics. We probably did it a little bit too late, and so the attendance wasn't as good as it could have been, because people had already settled in and weren't perhaps going to give up the time. So it's something we're always sort of mindful of and we'll be looking at again for 2022. But, you know, you have to want to be trained. And I think some of the new intake in 2018 were very keen to turn up, keen to take on board everything that they were told. And some people aren't. And you know, that's how it goes.
Yeah. Okay. I need to, because I was looking at the time and realizing where we were on time. So there is training and it does happen. Vivian, thank you for your question. I wanted to touch on scrutiny, because scrutiny, and I look particularly at Kristina and Jess on this, scrutiny has been in the spotlight of late because of the speed of which you've had to turn around things and are expected to scrutinise. And I just wanted to talk a little bit, and I'm sensing you're going to say how important scrutiny is. So let's just look at scrutiny, because people think of the states as the government. They think of all states members as being the government. And of course, not everyone is in the government, and some people are scrutinising the actions of government. Kristina, you've sat in both a ministerial position and you've sat in scrutiny. I guess they're both tough, aren't they? But at least you understand both of them. Are you frustrated in scrutiny? And do you feel that scrutiny is often frustrated by the actions of government?
It can be frustrating. And during this period, there have been moments of frustration, and it's been really difficult for some members, because we've been seen as an irritation. How very dare you question us when, you know, we're trying to deal with a crisis here. But it goes back to that bubble effect, doesn't it? That people can live in a bubble, particularly when they're doing some really intense work and very focused on that, working long hours. I think it's more important than ever that there is that other person or group of people who have a different perspective and haven't sat in that bubble with you, to say, are you really sure about that? Or can we just ask you about that? And that's what scrutiny is there for. It's there to provide that challenge, to sometimes make people feel uncomfortable, because actually through going through that process, being made to feel uncomfortable and putting your ideas through the grinder, then you come out with either greater assurance that you've got the right idea in the first place and it's the right direction to go in, or you realise that actually it isn't, and perhaps we do need to rethink. And so scrutiny has that power to bring amendments and to affect that process. And I think it's really important that we do maintain that distance from government, that separation between scrutiny and government. I know a lot of members are really keen on going back to a committee system or a sort of hybrid of that. But personally, I think it's really important to have that.
Okay. Frank, as a former Chief Minister, Frank, was it always better to get scrutiny in early and talk with scrutiny? I mean, presumably that's the case. And just a question about committee system as well. I saw it being mentioned and I saw the look on your face straight away. You've served in a committee system as well.
Yes, and I can understand the appeal to backbenchers who don't feel as involved as backbenchers used to do in the committee system. But people criticise the current system for not moving quickly enough. My goodness me, any comparison with the committee system shows it to be very, very much more fleet of foot than that was. It ground unbelievably slowly. And of course, scrutiny didn't exist in the committee system. Scrutiny came in with ministerial government. And I agree entirely with Kristina. It's absolutely vital, but it's absolutely vital that both sides, ministers and scrutiny, do the job properly. Ministers have got to engage. I always actually thoroughly enjoyed going to scrutiny. I think I was lucky with the panels that I sat in front of. Not all of my ministers enjoyed it. Some of them were better at it than others, which is hardly surprising. But I think ministers' responsibility is definitely to engage. Scrutiny's responsibility, and this is very clearly established when the process was set up, is to be a critical friend, is to genuinely try and improve propositions. Too often, it seems to me, that doesn't apply, and scrutiny, and I'm making no reference to any individuals here, scrutiny has become, or tries to become, either the opposition or a sort of secondary government. And as you said, Murray, that they are not. They are there to improve propositions and improve the process. And generally, I think it works reasonably well. But too often, as I've said, some members of scrutiny think they're the opposition, and point scoring becomes more important than improving the proposition, and that's wrong.
Okay, Jess, what do you make of that? Because you've had a tough week this week for scrutiny, and I think, and I watched your second speech on Wednesday, Thursday, which was a real from the heart emotional speech, and you know, you could feel it. I felt it. So I think that was born out of all of the work that you've done through scrutiny through the last week or so. So not an easy position being in scrutiny, I guess, because you're in a no-win, aren't you?
Yeah, it as you alluded to, that was a really tough day for scrutiny, and I personally found it very draining. But the reason for that is because, to me, scrutiny is a quality checking process. It's quality assurance of the government's policy with some fresh outside eyes. And if scrutiny aren't given the time to do that quality assurance, and then you are asked to vote on something, that is a very difficult position to be in, particularly if you have questions arising out of the thing that's been proposed, which was the position I found myself to be in the debates. I think, and again, this is similar to the difference between backbenchers and government, but scrutiny is hard because of the imbalance, the weight imbalance between the two groups. On the one hand, you have a group of people who are supported by policy developers, comms professionals and experts in their field. And while scrutiny has the capacity to perhaps call in an expert for a review or engage with people, it's sometimes hard to keep up with the pace of government because we just don't have the manpower and the resources at our fingertips that they do. I think what I also find difficult, and in scrutiny, and perhaps just generally as a backbencher, is I came from a work environment of great structure. You know, I was in a school. Your breaks were on the dot. You know, there was no flexibility of a timetable, and there's a very clear line of structure, of hierarchy. And I actually quite like hierarchy because I like feeling like I know where I am in the structure. I know where I could aim for. I know who's above me. And in politics, that doesn't exist really, apart from the chief minister and the council ministers having their portfolios. In the chamber, we're all equals. And so that can actually sometimes have a detrimental effect on the inner workings of the state, I think, because no member has the right to tell any other member what to do in terms of their workload. So, you know, it's not appropriate for me to say to Kristina, oh, can you go away and research X and I'll go and look at Y? Thankfully, she and I have a very collaborative relationship, and I've encouraged her to do that to me as a member of the panel that she chairs. But that we had to have that conversation where I said, well, I'm on your panel, please give delegates to me. And I think we've been really effective in working together in that way. But that's something I find hard in this structure. You're kind of free falling without a position in the hierarchy. And I think that's something that I think there are things we could do to improve scrutiny in that sense. I think we could say, you know, every member who's a backbencher should have to sign up to at least one panel. That's currently not the case. And then also you know, make some clearer directives around the position of the chair and the position of the chair's committee, just to empower us as a group. It's about empowerment, not about hierarchy, if you see what I mean. So that would be something I could see developing scrutiny in the future.
There are other parliaments around the world and within the Commonwealth that don't have enough politicians to go around to make sure there is effective scrutiny because they have a small parliament. We have 49. Someone told me that the magic number was 42 just to be able to make it work, and that is the answer to everything as we know. But I just wonder what you make of lay members of scrutiny. I think there is a scrutiny panel that has lay members on it, and I wonder if there are a lot of very bright, intelligent, probably even former politicians, may I say, Frank, that might have a view on things and could assist in scrutiny. And I just wonder if is there any leeway in that? I'm going to come to the Greffier first on this because you'll know the answer to this and I don't.
Yeah, we do have lay members on the Public Accounts Committee. I'm not, in principle, I'm not a huge fan of using lay members as members of committees, because the great advantage of the scrutiny panels we have at the moment is everybody's accountable. Everybody's accountable to the electorates. We know how they got there. We know why they're there. We know who they are and what the platform they stood on. And they're in the Assembly to justify their views. If they originate a proposition, we know exactly where it's come from, which members are responsible for it. And there's a full accountability there. Lay members can't be accountable in the same way. The appointment process is bound to be, it's behind closed doors. It's a bit like a recruitment process. People put in applications and get it for whatever reason. And then they're accountable to no one. And that just doesn't feel right to me, particularly because scrutiny does have, as others have said, a really significant role and has played a really significant part in the last couple of years in the governance structure. So there is a part to play for lay people. We always want people from the outside of the bubble, if you like, to submit their views to the scrutiny process. And we want to engage people as advisors to scrutiny panels to give them the expert input that they might sometimes need. And there's plenty of opportunity for that. But I think the membership has to be elected politicians.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a hybrid. Sorry to interrupt. I think there's a hybrid system. I think the point Murray made is right. There's so much expertise out there that we can draw on, and who would be prepared to be drawn upon, who can play a very active and very useful, valuable role in scrutiny, but they should not have a vote, because I pick up Mark's point. At the end of the day, it's members who have got to be accountable, but those non-members can play a major role in advising and steering members down a better path, if you like, providing it's only members at the end of the day, their decision, their vote.
Interesting thought there. Kristina, what do you make of that? Because, and I am running out of time, and so much I need to ask you before we go. I want to ask about what reforms you would make to the states to make it better, which will be another 2 hours, and also talk about, do you get paid enough for the job? But that's another 2 hours after that, so we'll be here till Saturday. But before that, let's just talk about those advisors, if you like, to scrutiny. Kristina.
I have an experience of using lay people on a scrutiny panel in the past, and it did actually work quite well, but I do take Mark's point about the accountability. It's tricky, huh? But it is a good way of engaging with, we have a lot of people in the community who are really politically minded and would be able to make fantastic contributions to politics, yet for very practical reasons, usually because of the salary, there's a real barrier to them standing for election. And so it would be a good way if we had a sort of gateway process that could give some element of accountability, perhaps. It would be a good way of starting to engage with those people, so that once their life reached a point where they could stand for election, then they perhaps could do so.
Okay, it's interesting that conversation that you almost alluded there in terms of reward. it's often said that people don't stand for the states for, well, for many different reasons, including, you know, the public haranguing they're likely to get, but also the financial reward for those people to say, you've got to be joking. I'm certainly not going to do it for that amount of money and give up all of that time because I've got a career as well. So where do we sit on reward? Do politicians get paid enough? Do they not get paid enough? Should the reward be higher and the bar be higher? Frank, you worked as a states member at a point, I think, when they were honorary before they got paid, or is that right to say? So there was no payment for states members at that time. So you've seen both sides of that. So should there be a better reward for being a politician?
Oh, you know, it's an incredibly difficult question. You know, there are many who believe that the basic salary is too high, and there are equally many who believe that it's a nonsense, and I'm one of them, that the chief minister, ministers, head of scrutiny panels, whatever, are paid the same as a backbencher who has none of those responsibilities. I think that makes us unique. Mark may correct me, but I don't know of any other government where responsibility isn't rewarded, and that's what happens in life. I think we got it wrong. I think the system needs a thorough review. Whether the entry point salary-wise is correct or not, I don't know in the current climate, but certainly if you want to attract people of real ability who by nature would want to go on and take jobs of responsibility, then you need to think very, very carefully about what rewards they're getting. We all know that people in the finance industry, the legal community and so on, earn considerable sums of money, and not many of them not enough of them certainly can afford to give that up and don't want to give it up as long as the present system prevails. I personally don't think it's the major deterrent to people standing, but the system is flawed and in my view certainly needs a thorough overhaul.
Jess, paid enough, not paid enough, hierarchical pay for responsibility, is that the way forward?
I don't know about hierarchical pay, haven't given it enough thought. You pay for what you get, and I think that we have to remember that states members are currently on an above average salary, so we are in an incredibly privileged and lucky position, and I for one feel very lucky to be in that position. Particularly when things are difficult. But if you are of the mindset that the Council of Ministers is essentially the executive board of the island, and it is your view that that board should contain experienced executives, then the reality is you're not going to attract experienced executives on a £46,000 salary. So there is that side of it, and that's irrespective of my views on salaries generally. That's just the kind of reality that we're living in. But I think that Frank was right when he says it's not necessarily the main or only deterrent. I think that a lot of people see a service in politics as a hindrance to their current career progression. And actually what I would like to see is more dialogue around serving a term, maybe two, and considering that a sort of public service and a dedication of your skill set and time for 4 or 8 years for the benefit of the island. And we need to kind of start generating a culture where people are grateful for people taking time out of their lives and their careers to serve Jersey and put us in the best position that we can be in. And that I think there's a bit of a dialogue and a culture shift that needs to happen before people start thinking, well, I'm going to run because I'm going to serve. And it is a break, but it's just a break. I'm going to go back to my career afterwards. I don't think that's something that we think of culturally. I think a lot of politicians, a lot of my colleagues have been in for a long time or intend to stay in for a very long time. And I don't necessarily think that is actually the healthiest thing for democracy. I think we should, I'm not saying we should force people to leave after a certain number of terms, but I personally wouldn't stay in for 50 years. I don't think that's healthy for the island. So there's a lot of cultural change to happen before I think we get a kind of mass enthusiasm for running for election.
All right, yeah, but let's hope that day does arrive. We are running out of time. Kristina, I'll very quickly come to you because I know you'll have a thought on this.
I think I just shared it, actually. I'm not sure I've got much more to add to that, Murray.
Okay, all right. I'm going to leave. I'm not going to come back. I'm going to come back to you unnecessarily at this point. I did have a question about connotabs and the involvement within the states. Are they becoming antiquated and unnecessary? Oh, I just need a yes or no from you here. Connotabs in or out of the states? Kristina. Okay, Jess.
Yeah. I think that constables should not have a vote in the states, but they are absolutely necessary in the parish.
Right, Frank.
Definitely in.
Definitely in. Kristina, you've got to, because I'm not going to go to the Gref for a vote on this. Definitely not. Kristina, do you want to leave that there?
I've always been a big supporter of the constables, and I campaigned for option B when we had a referendum many years ago.
Excellent. I don't think we've solved all of the problems of the states, and I don't think that we've highlighted all of the good points of the states that we could have done, but we've managed to get an hour's worth of discussion out of all of that, which many people I know will have and will enjoy once they watch it back. Frank Walker, former Chief Minister, thank you very much for joining us. Have a great weekend. Deputy Jess Perchard, have a weekend that you can relax over after the draining week that you've had. Enjoy. Senator Kristina Moore, thank you very much indeed for joining us as always, and good to talk to you. And indeed, Greffier of the States, Mark Egan, thank you for giving us a valued hour of your time when you've not been able to do anything else for a change. And we look forward to talking to you again in the future. Thank you all very much indeed. And to those watching, thank you very much indeed for joining the Chamber Web Chat. We'll be back next Friday with another one. Until then, have a good weekend. Goodbye all.
Bye.